All right, good morning, and thank you for joining. My name is Andy White, and I'll be your host this morning as we take a look at some of the basic troubleshooting tools and problem reporting tips. All right, this is first of a couple of webinars on the technical side that we'll be doing in December. There's a couple, 3 or 4 webinars on the sales side as well, so hopefully you've been able to take advantage of those. Today we're going to be looking at the basic troubleshooting and problem reporting. And next week, we'll look at the configuring the call center functions. So be sure to check back with us or register for that one next week. As far as the agenda, we've got about an hour session where we'll look at the QX system tools, some troubleshooting tips, where we'll look at an actual problem and some things that you can do to go about trying to solve it. And then how to report problems that you may encounter. Okay, so let me go ahead and close the slide. We're going to jump right into the system. I'm going to log into a local QX200 that I have here at my office. All right, so I'm logged into a QX200, and as far as some of the tools that you have available within a system, I just want to highlight some of these, and then we'll come back and see how we can actually use them to our advantage. So the first thing we want to look at is status, and you look at the system event logs. So when you come across a problem, you definitely want to take a look at the events, because sometimes right in the events it will give you an indication as far as a problem that might be occurring. And so you want to take a look at those event logs. Okay, that gives you a clue as to what might be happening. So if you have problems with a SIP trunk not registering, and it's trying to register to the provider's host name, and then you come in here and look and see events, related to some other problems trying to resolve the host name. Well, then at that point, it might be a problem with the DNS server, which would resolve those host names to actual IP addresses. So there's a lot of things that you can find out just by looking in your events. The call history also lends itself to some information. Okay, so for example, today, let's see, you can take a look at the details. It gives you the timestamp of your call. And the far right side is what I'm looking at, and this is in the details. So it gives you some information as far as the what we call the MOS score, as far as the quality or perceived quality of that particular phone call. So if we take a look at, let's see, here was a call that from a couple days ago. This was a 45-minute or 48-minute phone call, and it was determined to be an excellent call. And I know firsthand that I didn't have any problems during that call, but which makes sense because when you look at the actual information, the details on that call, both on the local side, which is between the phone and the QX, there were no packets lost. The jitter was very low, very minimal delay. And then on the WAN side, going to my SIP trunk, only 9 packets lost, which was less than it was 0.01%. Okay, and the jitter was extremely low at 19 and very little delay. So for a 1-hour phone call, only 9 lost packets. Yes, I can see why that was determined to be an excellent phone call. So that's one place where you can look. this information here, it also gives you, when you're troubleshooting, it also gives you your timestamps, which is important also with your problem reporting. If we look at maintenance and then go to diagnostics, there's a network diagnostics that you can run. I'm not going to run it because it actually takes a little bit of time to complete. From the same page, there's an FXO diagnostics where it'll go off hook and check some levels. If you're using POTS lines, you definitely want to use those or take advantage or use that, run that FXO diagnostics tool. And here's a place where you can download the system logs, and I'll also show you another place where you can download it also. Okay, there's a security diagnostics. So you can run a security audit on your system. Just press the Start Security Audit button. It does a check, checks the firewall, the IP lines, the call routing table. And it comes back. Actually, it tells me my security level is set to low, to the level of low, so it's not going to find any errors there. If you want to change your security level, it should actually be to at least a medium. I may have changed it to a low, maybe for adding some test numbers or something like that. So this is the security level. I change it to low, medium, so it's going to check that your passwords all meet a certain complexity to meet the medium standard. So now if I come back and run the security audit again, it tells me that I do have a weak password on IP line 15, local extension 19. I've got a call routing rule number 17 that's unprotected, so I should take a look at that. And there's an extension that's not doesn't have a good password. Okay, so it gives me some indications when you're run your security diagnostics. Okay, there's a network capture tool, and we're going to come back and look at this a little bit later, but this will you can do a packet capture of all the packets going across either the LAN interface, the WAN interface, or all interfaces, which would get the LAN and WAN ports. You can do a ping trace, for example, to google.com, and it will tell you how long, make sure it can reach the far end destination and the average, if there's any packet loss, and the average time that it took to do the ping request. You can also do the trace route, which would be similar. You can go to google.com. It shows you all the hops and the time intervals between each of the hops to get to the google.com website. Okay, there's if we look at system logs, this is really the main mechanism for doing your troubleshooting, and people do see these log files and they get overwhelmed by them because it's there is a lot of information there. But over here, you're going to see on the left side, there's certain buffers that we present to you on this system logs page. Okay, what you're not seeing is behind the scenes, there's probably a couple hundred buffers. So for example, if I take a moment to do a download on the log file. So I click on the download all logs, which is needed, by the way, if you're opening a problem with us, with our support team, we'll definitely request those system logs. All right, so I did a download of the log file. And let's see if I can open this. All right, the utility or application that you're going to use to open it well, the one I use anyway is WinRAR, WinRAR. It is a compressed file. So as you can see, there are many folders. Let's say if I click on the log folder, you can see all the different buffers. So in each one of these buffers obviously contains information that's going to be useful towards resolving or looking at the problem at hand. Okay, so there's a tremendous amount of information to be gathered from this. Okay, so that's why we're going to request that you send us the log file. All right. The other thing is, when you're doing troubleshooting, there's certain problems that occur that users report, and a lot of times they can be resolved, but if we have the information, if we have the log file, well, you know as well as I do, when the user goes to report a problem, it's never at a convenient time. Let's say if they have a drop call, it's always a good example. They're on a call and the call gets dropped. Okay, you can tell that user that once that call gets dropped, that they can hang up the call, their existing call, and then they need to go off hook, and they can dial the feature code *82. I'll go ahead and do it.
The system logs have been saved.
All right, so you get a confirmation back from the system that tells you that the system logs have been saved. Okay, so now if I go in and download all these logs again, we'll see what that's actually doing. Okay, so that's when they dial the *82, what it's doing is it's setting aside a file, and you can see it right here. It created a separate folder within the folders. Okay, a log file within the log file itself, and it's called user logs. So it's basically a subset. If we open it, okay, and then I click on user logs and I go to view, and you can see it has a subset of the overall, also the system logs. So that's basically a snapshot of this point in time, right when the user dialed the *82. It saved those logs. So what does that do for you? I mean, you don't have to be at the site. You just tell the user, hey, if the call gets dropped, dial *82. And then we can get the information. You can download that file, whether it be that afternoon or 2 days or 3 days from now, it doesn't matter. That information will still be saved in the system. So that's an excellent tool. You do want to use this maybe sparingly, because if you create too many of these, if you have 10 users that are dialing *82 throughout the course of the day, this file is going to get huge. So use it sparingly, maybe with a particular user if they're having an ongoing issue and you're having problems trying to get information. Maybe work with that particular user to get you the information that you need. Now we still need the details of that call. So where can you get the details? From the user, but as well you can go back to your call history and look at the timestamp and the call. We need to know the number that was called, the extension that it was calling from. Okay, and by the way, when it comes to a drop call, there's a difference, but to the user, it seems all the same. Okay, a drop call could be one of two things. Either the user was still actually connected, but they couldn't hear the far end. They couldn't hear the person that they're speaking with. So the call itself is not really dropped, but the audio was lost. Okay, so whereas an actual drop call, their phone would go back to the idle screen. So there's definitely a difference in the way you go about troubleshooting that is going to be different as well. Okay, if they're they lost the audio, the system logs may not show us and give us the details as far as why they lost the audio. That's probably more of a network type issue, whereas a drop call might be, it's maybe something different altogether. With the log file, we can see which end dropped the call. Was it dropped from the far end, from the SIP trunk, or was it dropped locally from the phone or even from the system? Okay, so let's go and let's take a look at an actual call. If I go to System Log Settings, we're going to ask you to do us a favor. It's going to help in when you're reporting a problem, and even for yourself, that just prior to making a phone call, that you come in here and mark the system logs. Just put in a little comment, whatever you want to reference, and click the Mark All Logs button. What does that do? So if you go to the system logs, again, this is just a subset of their overall log file. There's a scroll bar on the right-hand side, and you can scroll all the way down. You can also, till you get to the bottom, but you can also click on this arrow and it will take you to the bottom. Okay, all the most recent information will be at the bottom of this buffer. It comes in from the bottom and pushes its way up to the top of the screen. And you can see there's pages of information here. All right, so if we want to, let's go back to the last page where I inserted that log marker. So after we make a test call, the call is going to fall below this log marker. Okay, so let's dial the number that's called to the office.
Welcome to Epygi Technologies. If you know the extension of the person you are trying to reach, enter it at...
Okay, now let's refresh. This information is static, so you have to refresh that buffer. And now on this page itself, I'm looking at the SIP user agent. Now I can search for that log marker. Okay, now keep in mind, in a busy office, you're going to, you might have to search several pages, and that's why it's always easier to download. Sometimes it's easier to download the actual log file and open it yourself, rather than trying to scan and find a particular call within the log file, because sometimes it might be on a different page. It might be part of the call is on one page, and the rest of the information is on a different page. So here's our log marker. Here's the beginning of our phone call. And there's some things that I always like to point out when I'm looking at the log file. All right, so you see every phone call begins with what we call an invite. Okay, there's a SIP invite. Okay, remember there's two parts for a voice over IP phone call. There's two parts to the call. The first part is the SIP, and that's the session initiation protocol, which is the messaging, which establishes the call itself. And then there's the audio, which is referred to as a real-time protocol, or RTP. So there's two parts to the call. So you got the audio, and then you got your messaging. So what we're looking at now is the SIP messaging. Okay, when the phone collects all the digits, it will send all the digits all at one time to the system. Okay, there's the office number, 972-692-1166. When looking at these logs, I always tell people, take a look at the SIP message buffer start, and look, if you're not sure where this message came from, look at the line just right above it. So it'll tell you this particular message came from the IP 172.30.0.10, port 5060, and it's being sent to the QX local LAN port at 172.30.0.1. Okay, I can also see that it was sent from, if you look at the contact field, I can see who sent that information. Okay, it was sent from local extension 100. And if you look at the SIP user, the agent, I can see this came from a Polycom phone. Okay, so this information, this first invite, came from the phone itself. And down here, all this information is pertaining to the audio. So it has all these voice codecs that's available from the phone itself. If you're not used to seeing these SIP logs, you'll get familiar with them after you look at them a time or two, but the sequence is always the same. It begins with a SIP invite from the phone. The system has to respond with a trying message, basically acknowledging that it received the SIP invite. Then you have the system responds with an unauthorized message telling the phone that, hey, it needs some more information. And the phone acknowledges receipt of that unauthorized message. So having received that message, the phone itself will resend the invite, and this time it has a username and password contained in the invite. Okay. Here it has the username, local extension 100, and then there's an encrypted password. Now the system has the digits, sends back a trying message, and now it's checking in the tables. The call routing table finds an entry, and now it's trying to make a call out through the SIP trunk provider. And you can see out the WAN port, it's trying to send a call to that IP address, which is the SIP trunk, and it inserted a 1. So we're sending a 1 plus 10 digits to the SIP trunk provider. And this time the message came from the QX, and it gives the information about the audio. We're trying to use PCMU, which is G.711 codec. In this information right here, you'll see the audio 7012. That's the RTP port number that the QX is expecting to receive, where it's looking for the audio to be received. Okay. And of course, they respond with a trying. Looks very similar to the setup between the phone and the QX. They reply with a proxy authentication required. We acknowledge that. And now we resend the invite to them with the username and password contained in it. Okay, and then they respond with a trying, and then a session progress. And then when the call finally gets answered by the far end, they send us a 200 OK message to the QX. And now we have to tell the phone that the call has now been answered, and we send back a 200 OK message to the phone locally. At that point in time, that's the beginning of your phone call, and you'll hear the audio at that point. Okay, one of the things that that you'll see a lot of, if this is a busy office, there's going to be a lot of phone calls, a lot of different messages going back and forth, and that's where people get confused. This is one phone call. There's nobody else making calls here at the moment, so it's easy to follow the sequence. But if this is a busy office, then you're going to have to put in a little bit more effort to try to figure out the actual messages. One of the things that you can look at, a couple things actually. One is the sequence number. So when the system sent the invite to the provider, it gives it a sequence number 148. Okay, and when they answer, when they come back and respond with a trying message, when they answer, they're going to reference that sequence number 148. You can see it right there in this trying message. The same thing when they send us back a call progress message, and when they send back the 200 OK message, all the time that they're referencing that sequence number 148. The other thing that you can look at when you're in this invite is the call ID. So the QX provides a call ID for this leg of the call. So if I copy that information, and if I do a Control F, I search this page, you can see that that call ID is referenced throughout any sort of dialogue or messaging. Here's the 200 OK. When we acknowledge the 200 OK, and then also when we send the bye message to them, which is the end of the phone call, that's call ID number is referenced throughout the entire call. Okay, so let's take a look at so given that information so far, let me show you another tool that I like to use. Okay, if I go to my extension, in this case extension, close that. All right, we'll go to the, let's get out of this. All right, my browser is a little bit slow for some reason. I'm trying to display all that information, I guess, but. All right, so if we go to the extension 100, one of the things that I like to do is you can set a speed call entry on your extension. So if you're having problems making a call to maybe through your SIP trunk provider, one of the tools that I always like to do is make a call to another system. So if you have your own PBX at your office, your own QX, if you have that option, hopefully you do, and you're at a customer site and they're having some issues with audio, we'll make a call to a good known working system. And it's always helpful. The reason I do that is because it's always, and I've solved many issues by doing this exact thing, because especially when the system is on a private network, the QX is on a private network, and then it has to go through the customer's firewall. And when it exits that firewall, some firewalls are more friendly to SIP. Some just are not. If they're doing what they call symmetric NATing, the port numbers get changed. So the QX might be sending from SIP port 5060, and but on the other side of the firewall, when it egresses or exits the firewall, that 5060 is no longer 5060. It's now something else. So the firewall has changed that port number. And speaking of which, if you go to telephony and if you look at SIP, you can see the UDP and TCP port for by default, it's port 5060. That's for the SIP messaging. If we look at the voice ports for RTP, in my system, I've got it set for 7,000 to 7,255. So there's a range there of 256 ports. If you're needing to open some ports on the customer's firewall, then you may want to open those ports. Okay, but keep in mind, like I just mentioned, the QX might be sending from and wanting to use these ports, but the firewall itself might not be using those ports on the as it exits on the WAN side of the firewall. It might be something other than 7,000 or 5060. And if you want to see that, it's always good to make a phone call to another office, another good working office. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to make a call. I'm going to make a test call to, I go to my speed call entry, and I'm going to make a SIP call to 00 at that IP address, and for my speed call entry, I just do the #57. Okay, first of all, I want to make a call to it. I'm going to dial 8820530.
Welcome to Epygi Technologies. If you know the extension of the person you are trying.
Okay, so I know that worked. Now let's make a call directly to it, dialing 00 at that IP address, which should reach the same destination. So I'm going to enter #57 and make a call. And yes, I did make that phone call, and there's no audio. No audio. I'm not hearing the far end. Okay, let's take a look at that again. I'm going to go to the, so let's see if the call is established. Let's go to the QX, the dashboard. If I do a redial, and I can see that, yes, that call is established, and I'm not hearing any audio. So let's take a look at the far end. Let's see if that call really is connected. So now I'm looking at the other site, and I can see that, yes, it is connected to the auto tenant, but there's no audio that's heard. Okay, so how do we go about troubleshooting that? So I made a call, and I should be hearing audio. If I go to maintenance on that far end office, I go to look at the diagnostics. I want to do a packet capture. So this time I'm going to go and click on network capture. And I want to capture all the packets going on across the WAN interface. So I want to see if that auto tenant is actually answering at the far end. Okay, and if it is answering, what are we doing with the call? Actually, I'm going to stop the capture here a moment. Okay, so I want to do the packet capture, but in my own office, I want to see what the call looks like. So if I go to the system log settings, I'm going to give myself a new log marker. We'll call it test2. Click mark all logs. Now let's start the packet capture, and we'll make that call again. Okay, it's running, so I'm going to do #57, make a speed call. Okay, I am connected, and I'm not hearing any audio, so I'm going to stop the call. Let's go back to, excuse me, I'm losing my voice this morning. I'm going to stop the packet capture, and let's download the capture. So this is a packet capture of that call. Everything actually on that, going across that WAN interface at the far end device. Okay, so we downloaded it. But let's look at our logs for the local office. This is the originating QX200. So if we search for test2, you can see the from the phone it does the #57, which is the percentage 23, which is represents the pound. So I dial the #57. I get the invites from the phone, just like we just looked at. Then we make an outbound call. We dial 00. at that IP address. Okay, so I'm trying to reach the 00, which is the auto tenant. So we do send a call and we do get a response. They respond back with a trying, a ringing, and then a 200 OK. So they're answering the call, and we saw the call was answered. So now that we've downloaded the packet capture, I'm going to open that using Wireshark. If you've never used Wireshark before, you'll want to download it. It's a free tool. Don't be afraid to use it. There's a tremendous amount that you can do with a Wireshark tool. However, you just need to know some of the basics of it. So here's packet capture. If I go to telephony, if I click on VoIP calls, it does open another window. And you can see in that packet capture, there's one phone call. Okay, it came from 20572, which is my extension SIP number, trying to reach 00. Okay, if I click play streams, okay, it opens another window. Okay, I'm not sure if you were able to hear that, but in my headset, I could hear the audio actually being played. So this is the auto tenant that's answering. So I know the far end auto tenant is answering the call and it's playing the audio. Okay, on this packet capture, I can actually see what the problem is. Okay, but we're going to come back to that in a minute. Okay, if I look at the, oops, sorry, back to my packet capture. If I look at this, if I click on this, I have to close that first. Okay. Okay, so if I look at this phone call, click on it and click below at the bottom, it says flow sequence. It's going to open another window for me. And you can see all the information that came to this far end QX. There's the invite that came in, a trying that's responded to, the reply, the ringing, the 200 OK when the call is answered by the auto tenant. We acknowledge the call, and then you can see RTP being sent, RTP being the actual voice. Again, on this packet capture, I can see the problem. We'll come back and look at this. So it's telling us where the problem is on this packet capture. Okay, what's pretty cool about this packet information is, or this trace, you can click on any one of these. Let's say if you click on this invite, you can see in the background, it takes me to where that actual packet is, which is right here. Packet number 91 came from this IP 23.123 to here. Here's the invite. So I'll move it to the top of the screen. Here's the invite. There's 3 panes, window panes in this tool. In this middle pane, you can right click and expand all. And then you'd actually be able to see the contents of that packet. And it looks like the invite, just like what we had seen below before. So let's look at the originating QX200, the one that actually sent the call, which is my office. And we can see in here, we got the invite that's being sent. So this is the same information that gets received at the far end. All right. And there's no audio, even though there is audio being played from the far end. I'm not hearing it. Why don't I hear it? Okay, the The reason is actually in this invite itself that's being sent to the far end office. Okay, so if we look at the voice information, which is down here towards the bottom, there's an audio port. It's we're using port 7052 from the QX. That's the port that the QX is listening on. And just above that, it gives the audio IP address to where it's expecting to receive the audio. Okay, that IP address is what? That's a private IP address, 192.168.1.85. Excuse me. That is the QX WAN IP address. Okay, you can see it up here. That's the QX WAN IP address. So if we look at the packet captures, not only if we look at the flow sequence, you can see the RTP from this site where the auto tenant's located is sending the audio to the IP address there at the top, 192.168.1.185. Well, this is going across the internet, so that will never reach us. That will never reach us because we're on a private IP. We need that far end QX to send the audio to the public IP address where my site is located. And the same thing when we do the when we play the streams. You can see here down the bottom the audio port. It's from the local QX port 6008 is being sent to the private IP 192.168.1.185 port 7052. The port number is right, but we don't, the private IP is not going to work. Okay, so we need this QX here to be a little bit smarter about things and to actually be able to send the public IP address. Okay, this system is behind a firewall. If we go to status, system status, look at the network details, you can see that the WAN port that I have, there's the private IP 192.168.1.185. So I'm behind a firewall, which means the system is what we call NATed, N-A-T-T-E-D, NATed. So if we go to telephony and I look at NAT traversal, I've got the NAT traversal settings disabled, okay? So I need to turn that on to automatic. And what the NAT traversal is going to do is it's going to identify what the public IP address is. So if we look at the SIP parameters, it's going to go out and contact this, what we call the stun server, S-T-U-N, the stun server, and it's going to basically ask the question of the stun server, what's the public IP address where this message come from? It's going to send a test message to the stun server for SIP and basically ask the question, what IP address do you see this message originating from? And by the way, what port number do you see this message coming from? Okay, so there's two ways you can actually use the stun server to identify that, or use what we call manual NAT traversal, where you know what your public IP address is. If it's a static IP, you can basically change it to manual NAT traversal and set the static IP and port number that's used. I'm going to leave it as stun. And then you also have NAT settings, NAT traversal settings for the voice port as well. Voice, not single port, but ports. Okay, same thing here. You can go out, contact the stun server, or you can use manual NAT traversal where you specify the public IP and the port number range. Okay, if I go back to status and events, let's see, you should see, usually it updates the port numbers when it identifies the, once it contacts the stun server. Let's go back and save those settings. Maybe it'll trigger that. Okay. Also, if you look here under system status and SIP registration, you can see I'm registered to the SIP trunk, and just below it, it provides the external IP address and port number for SIP. So that's what was detected. Okay, let's here locally on the QX, I'm going to go to system log settings, and let's do a new log marker, test 3, click mark all logs, and hopefully now if we'll get some audio if I do the pound 57, which is my speed dial.
Welcome to Epygi Technologies. If you know the extension of the person you are trying to...
And this time we do get the audio. So let's see the difference in that call and the effect of having the NAT traversal settings configured correctly. So here you get the invite from the phone, 2 invites. Here's the invite going out. We're trying to reach 00 at that IP address. And notice the difference this time in the IP address. So we're telling the far end system, when you send the audio, you're going to send it to this public IP address and this particular port number. Obviously, the call worked because we heard the audio this time. But you can see the benefit and how helpful it is to see what the call looks like at the far end. All right, especially when you're dealing with firewall issues, it's always good to see the far end and be able to see what's coming, what's leaving the QX. Okay. I've had many examples where people say, I've got all my ports open and everything looks fine. You might open port 5060, but leaving the QX again, if it's doing symmetric NAT traversal, leaving the firewall as it exits the firewall, it might not be 5060. So they're trying to send back to some port number that you don't have, you're not even aware of, and you don't know what that port number is. All right, so all right, so let's just wrap this up a little bit. So mark the logs. You know, if you're reporting a problem to us, you can see why it's helpful that you mark the logs of your test call. Provide us the details of your test call. Get the information if you from your call history, so you can identify the exact timestamp and the phone numbers involved in that call. Okay, and then make sure you've got a good, accurate problem description. So don't just tell us that the call failed or whatever. We need to know which extension originated, which number that they dialed, the timestamp. We need to hear all that, as well as the details of what actually took place on that call. Okay, and a lot of that information you can get right here from your call history. And then lastly, once you have all your information, then you can go to our website, go to the support portal. If you haven't done so already, you can register to our support portal. Click register, and then so you can get an account with us. Okay, there's no obligation to do so. Give us a heads up though, if you do register, be sure to send us an email or something, because we do need to update your account accordingly. So when you log in, you're going to you can submit any problems. We don't like to do those via email. Um, Definitely, prefer a support ticket with all the information. Um, Phone calls, should only, try to limit the phone call activity because it's easier to when we have the information in front of us and easier to work on those through a support ticket. All right, we do have support plans, so you can open get a ticket, single ticket. They're annually renewable, so you get a quantity of whatever 5, 10, unlimited, or even a single ticket. When you go to enter your ticket information, it's going to go to general, and you can specify the priority, the product that you're using. In this case, the QX200, the software version that you have, whatever it might be, 6.378. It's not too important, to be honest, but just you put that in there, and then the subject and the details of the problem, and then you can add down here. You can add any files that you have. All right, so that's it. That's some just basic troubleshooting information and how to look at a couple problems. Give you some ideas on things that you can do. It's always helpful to do those speed dial calls to another system, the far office, so you can see what's actually coming out of the system. We do have this call recorded, or this webinar recorded today, so we'll get it posted out there. I'm going to go ahead and stop